All right, folks, I'm going to continue because, well, I want to get out of here. So I want to get this over with, as I'm sure all of you do as well. What was I going to say? Hold on a second. Oh, yeah. Just a reminder that the final itself is not curved, but the final grade is curved. And so the final is a big opportunity for people looking for a strong comeback, looking for a strong finish. If you wind up earning a lot of points in the final, then that'll add a lot of points to your overall score, and it'll move you up the curve relative to everybody else. So a lot of people will just kind of depend on the fact that like all grades will be curved in the end, and that's true. I don't curve the final, but I curve your final grade. But that means that people are going to just perform the way they normally perform on an exam without getting the extra boost from the curve. So if you get high points on there, it'll really bump you up. So if you're looking, again, for a strong finish, any kind of big impact from the final, you can have it, and you just have to kill the final. So make sure that you do that, and things should improve for those that looking for an improvement, but also for those looking to just have a strong finish after having a strong semester. Then you'll have that as well without any uncertainty. All right, so that's just the last thing I wanted to mention that I forgot to mention at the beginning of class. And now let us move on. So again, we're talking about strategies that yield even greater profits for firms that have market power. And the one we're talking about right now is the last of the four that involve extracting consumer surplus, which is called commodity bundling. All right. So this strategy, commodity bundling, refers to the practice of bundling two or more different products together and selling them in a single bundled price. Travel companies often sell package deals that include airfare, hotel, and meals that are bundled at a bundled price instead of pricing each component of the vacation separately. Computer firms bundle computers, monitors, software, and sell them at a bundled price. Many car dealers bundle options such as air conditioning, power steering, and automatic transmission and sell them at a special package price as well. So that's all. Those are all versions of commodity bundling. So suppose a manager of a firm, a computer firm, knows that there's two types of consumers who value consumers and monitors differently. So the table shows the maximum amount that the two consumers would be willing to pay for a computer and a monitor. Consumer 1 is willing to pay $2,000 for the computer itself. Consumer 2, $1,500. Consumer 1 is willing to pay for $200 for the monitor, and consumer 2 is willing to pay more for the monitor, $300. The manager does not know the identity of each consumer, so she cannot price discriminate by charging each consumer a different price. So she cannot third-degree price discriminate or first-degree price discriminate. Suppose the manager priced each component separately. One price for the computer and one price for the monitor. The computer price is PC, the monitor price is PM. To simplify the profit computations, we'll suppose the cost to the firm of the computers is 0, and the monitors as well. All right, so we're only going to look at profits as a function of revenue without costs, just to make it simple. So if the firm charged, let's say, $2,000 for a computer, then it would only sell one computer. Because again, that second person is only willing to pay $1,500. If the firm charged $1,500 for a computer, then both consumers would buy the computer, and that would net the firm $3,000, which is higher than the $2,000. So the profit maximizing price to charge for the computer is therefore $1,500. Similarly, if the firm priced monitors at $300, then only consumer 2 would buy the monitor. If pricing the monitor at $200, then the firm would be able to sell the monitor to both consumers. And therefore, in that case, they would make $400 versus the $300 with selling it only to one computer, only one consumer, and therefore the profit maximizing price to charge for a monitor is $200. On the surface, it appears that the most the firm can earn is $3,400 by pricing computers at $1,500 and monitors at $200. But the reality is a firm can earn higher profits by bundling the computer and the monitors and selling the bundle at a price of $1,800. That's the total value to the first consumer of a computer and a monitor. Well, the total value to the first consumer of the computer and the monitor together is $2,200. And the total value to the second consumer of a computer and a monitor is $1,800. So they both at least value the computer at $1,800. By bundling a computer and a monitor and selling the bundle for $1,800, the firm will sell a bundle to both consumers and earn $3,600. So we see that by commodity bundling, they're able to increase the amount the firm can earn by selling them independently, and again trying to price them at a price where both their willingness to pay for the individual components is met. In this case, they are looking at the total value to each consumer and then pricing it based on that combination. So if the manager knew precisely each consumer's valuation, the firm could earn higher profits by engaging in price discrimination. All right, quick demonstration problem. Suppose 3 purchases of a new car have the following valuation for options. 3 purchasers of a new car, sorry, so 3 different customers. So again, there's 3 consumers. The first one values air conditioning at 1,000, power brakes at 500. The second one values air conditioning at 800 and power brakes at 300. The third one values air conditioning at 100 and power brakes at 800. If the manager knows the valuations and identity of each customer, what is the optimal pricing strategy? So again, if they know exactly how much the consumers are willing to pay for each thing, then they're going to want to price discriminate. Suppose the manager does not know the identities of the buyers. How much will the firm make if the manager sells brakes and air conditioning for $800 each, but offers a special options package, power brakes and air conditioning, for $1,100? All right, so let's consider each in turn. So first one, if the manager knows the buyer's identities, then he'll likely maximize profits through price discrimination, since resale for these products is unlikely. You can't buy an option for a car and then sell it to somebody else. So the firm's profits in that case will be $1,600 for the first consumer plus $1,100 for the second consumer. So again, this is the manager knowing the valuations and identity of each customer, so therefore they can sell the air conditioner and power brakes to the third consumer for $900. So that's $3,500. So again, we talked about how maybe like a car salesman can figure out how much people are willing to pay by, again, pricing things above marginal cost at a ridiculously high price and then letting them talk them down to the level that they're willing to pay. So this would reflect that kind of approach, but again, it is tricky and it may not necessarily reveal how much people are willing to pay. So suppose instead the manager does not know the identities of the buyers. How much will the firm make if the manager sells brakes and air conditionings for $800 each, but offers a special options package of brakes and air conditioning for $1,100 each? All right, so selling brakes and air conditioning for $800 each. So air conditioning for $800, that means that the third person would not buy the air conditioning, so only the first 2 would. Selling power brakes at $800 means that only the third person would buy the power brakes, because that's the only person willing to pay that much. But putting them together at $1,100, well, we see that consumer 1 values both of them together at $1,600. We see the second one values both of them together at $1,100, and the third one only at $900. So we see that at $1,100, there's at least 2 consumers that would buy this commodity bundle. This sort of example of how the firm can use this approach to make higher profits. So consumers 1 and 2 will buy the option package because a bundle with an air conditioner and power brakes is worth at least $1,100 to them. The firm earns $2,200 on these consumers. Consumer 3 will not buy the bundle because its total cost is greater than the consumer's valuation of $900, but they will buy the power brakes. So consumer 3 will buy the power brakes at $800, so therefore the firm will earn $2,200 on the customers that bought the commodity bundle, plus the $800 from the consumer that is willing to pay what the firm is willing to charge for power breaks, which is the 800. So they'll make $3,000 altogether in this example. All right, so that's the end of the pricing strategies that allow the firms to extract consumer surplus. Let's look at the second to last section of the chapter, dealing with pricing strategies for special cost and demand structure. So the first one is called peak load pricing. Many markets have periods in which demand can oscillate. Sometimes it'll be higher during the day than at night. Sometimes it'll be higher during one season than another. Toll roads tend to have more traffic during rush hour than other times of the day. Utility companies tend to have higher demand during the day than during late evenings. Airlines tend to have heavier traffic during the week than during weekends. When the demand during peak times is so high that the capacity of the firm cannot serve all consumers at the same time, then the profitable thing for the firm to do is engage in what's called peak load pricing. So the figure will illustrate a classic case of peak load pricing. So let's suppose that marginal cost is constant up until a point where it becomes vertical. At that point where it becomes vertical, the firm is operating at full capacity. They cannot serve any more customers and cannot provide additional units at any price. These are the two demand curves in the figure corresponding to peak and off-peak demand for the product. So D low is the off-peak demand. So you can think of it again as like, if this is like a utility, this is the times of the day that people maybe are not using that much electricity versus the D high. So maybe it's a summer month here in the valley when it gets really hot during the day, and maybe at night people, it tends to cool off sometimes, and then people don't use their air conditioning as much. So these could represent, again, demand during the day versus demand at night for electricity. In general, where there are two types of demand, a firm will maximize profits by charging different prices to the different groups. In the case of peak load pricing, the groups refer to those who purchase at different times during the day. So demand during low peak times is such that marginal revenue equals marginal cost at QL. So during low peak times, again, they look at the demand during that time, and they look at the marginal revenue, and then they, of course, equate marginal revenue to marginal cost to figure out how much will be demanded. And then to set the price, obviously, they go up to their demand curve. In this case, the profit maximizing price is PL to represent that it's a lower price during off-peak times. During high peak times, marginal revenue will equal marginal cost here. So again, the firm will be operating at capacity, providing as much service as they are capable of providing. The profit maximizing price, therefore, will be, again, the price that people are willing to pay for that quantity. So again, that corresponds to the high demand time. And so the price is going to be this high price, which is PH. As is the case in price discrimination, the firms charge two different prices. If the firm charged a high price of PH at all times of the day, no one would purchase during the low peak period. So again, you have all these people that have a willingness to pay that is a lot lower than these folks over here. And so if they were to charge this price all the time, then these people would not buy ever. If the firm charged a low price during all times of the day, it would lose money during the times of the day, during the high peak times of the day. So again, that's one example of how the firm can sort of operate under this sort of strange demand structure. All right, so another one is called cross subsidies. A firm that engages in a strategy of cross subsidies uses profits made from one product to subsidize sales of another product. So we see it a lot in like car manufacturers. They'll have like their luxury class car versus like the economy class car. Economy class cars will generally be priced at a price lower than even maybe even their marginal cost. but they'll have really high markups on the luxury class cars, and so the extra profits they make from that sort of subsidize the sort of cheap prices and maybe even the loss that they take on the economy class cars. So that's called cross subsidy. So this strategy is relevant in situations where a firm has cost complementarities and demand by consumers for a group of products is interdependent. So cost complementarities, again, reflects lower marginal cost of production when things are produced together versus apart. One clear example is Adobe. They charge dramatically different prices for two of their products. They have the Adobe Reader and the Adobe Acrobat. Adobe enjoys economies of scope and cost complementarities in making these two products jointly. Again, the additional cost of producing additional units of each of them is less because they're producing them together. That's cost complementarities. And the overall cost of producing each of them together is less than producing them separately. So it's cheaper to design and distribute both types of software within one firm. Adobe prices Adobe Reader at or below cost, permitting it to charge a higher price for Adobe Acrobat. So that can be summed up in this principle, cross-subsidization. Whenever the demand for two products produced by a firm are interrelated through cost or demand, the firm may enhance profits by cross-subsidization. All right, this one's a little bit more tricky. It's called transfer pricing. So the pricing strategies thus far are based on the assumption that a single manager is in charge of pricing and output decisions. Most large firms have both an upstream and a downstream manager who must make price and output decisions for their own division. So upstream managers generally are the managers of maybe the parts of the firm that produce the components that are then put together in the downstream part of the firm and sold to the end user. So if you think about, like, maybe the example we'll look at involves Ford, or like a car manufacturer, they also maybe produce like the car engines. They produce the components of the transmissions. So you're going to have a manager within the firm sort of managing that division, and then you're going to have a manager managing the division that puts the car together and then sells it to the end user. So the inputs are transferred to the downstream division, where downstream managers operate plants that use the inputs to produce the final output. An important issue in this setting is optimal transfer pricing, the internal price at which an upstream division should sell inputs to the firm's downstream division to maximize the overall profits of the firm. Transfer pricing is important because most division managers are provided an incentive to maximize their own division's profits. So if you have a huge firm, so remember in chapter 5 we talked about how if like spot exchanges are too complex to buy inputs and contracting is too complex and expensive, that the firm should vertically integrate and basically produce the inputs themselves. So this is essentially a case of that, where you have a huge firm that has decided to do that. So maybe they've integrated the production of the engine of the car, and they also are a car manufacturer. Producing a car engine is a big deal. You have to get all the inputs for the car engine. You have to have a large assembly plant putting the engine together. You have to have a lot of labor in a hierarchical system, workers, supervisors, etc. You need technicians to man the machines and keep up the maintenance on them. Like, there's a lot to manage. So you're going to need a big, powerful manager within the firm managing that division, and there's going to be another manager managing the process of putting the car together and getting it in perfect shape to be able to be sold to the end user. And that is big enough that you're going to get another big, powerful manager. Each manager has to manage essentially their own firms within the firm, and so they each have an incentive to do whatever it takes to kind of maximize their own profits within the firm. So the transfer pricing problem is one that basically requires the interest of all the managers to align within the firm. So So that obviously sometimes can be a problem because the firm managers are, again, interested in maximizing their own bottom line. So if the owners of a firm do not set the optimal transfer price, the result will be lower overall profits for the firm. Suppose there's no outside market for the input produced by the upstream division. So the engine being produced, let's say, is very specific to the car being made and nobody else can buy it. And that division managers are instructed to maximize the profits of their divisions, not the overall firm. The upstream division manager has market power because, again, the upstream division manager is selling just to the downstream division. So they are essentially a monopolist. They are selling to one firm. Nobody else is buying from them. So they have market power within the firm. And so they maximize the profits of the upstream division by producing where the marginal revenue derived from selling the downstream derived from selling to the downstream division equals the upstream division's marginal cost. The input is then sold to the downstream division at a price that exceeds the firm's actual marginal cost. So instead of just kind of thinking like we're going to maximize overall profits, like this upstream division that is making the car engines wants to make a profit on the car engines from the downstream division so that they can look better overall. So given this input price, the downstream manager would then need to maximize division profits by producing where the marginal revenue it earns in the final product market, which we can denote MRD, so marginal revenue for the downstream division, where its marginal revenue equals marginal cost. So this implies that it too prices above marginal cost. So there's a double what's called marginalization going on, which leads to higher prices. Due to the situation, the downstream division ends up charging a price for the final product that's actually higher than the price and maximizes overall firm profits. So this double marginalization is less than the optimal overall firm profits. All right, to avoid the problem of double marginalization, transfer prices have to be set that maximize the overall value of the firm rather than the profits of the upstream division. So to see how this can be accomplished, suppose that the downstream division, again, the division that puts the car together, requires one unit of the input, which is, let's say, a car engine, to produce 1 unit of the final output, the car. Assume that the downstream division has a marginal cost of assembling the final output of MCD. So that's, again, the cost to put the car together. And that is in addition to the cost of acquiring the input from the upstream division. So they have to pay the upstream division for the input, and then they have a marginal cost of putting the car together. The overall profits of the firm are going to be maximized when the upstream division produces engines such that its marginal cost, MC subscript U, again, the upstream division's marginal cost, equals the net marginal revenue to the downstream division, where net marginal revenue to the downstream division equals the marginal cost from the upstream division where the net marginal revenue of the downstream division is said to be equal to the marginal cost of the upstream division. So the net marginal revenue from the downstream division equals the difference between the downstream division's marginal cost and the marginal revenue of selling the car. So again, they sell the car, they get a marginal revenue, and then they subtract their marginal cost, which then leaves only the difference between those to be the marginal cost of producing the engine. So if the net marginal revenue is set equal to the marginal cost of putting the engine together, then the firm will be maximizing its profits. All right, so to see why, notice that it costs the firm MCU. So this is the marginal cost of the upstream division to produce another unit of the input, the engine. The engine can be converted into another car and sold to generate additional revenues of MRD. So again, once the car has the engine in it and it's sold to the end user, then the firm will earn a marginal revenue, and that marginal revenue will come from selling the car via the downstream division. That's where the D comes from. In the final product market, only after the downstream division spends an additional MCD to put the car together. So the actual marginal benefit to the firm of producing another unit of the input is going to equal that net marginal revenue of the downstream division. Again, it's going to equal the difference between the marginal revenue they earn minus the marginal cost of putting the car together. So that's the actual marginal benefit to the entire firm of producing another unit of the car. Setting that equal to the marginal cost of producing the input, which is again the upstream division's marginal cost, is what maximizes the overall firm profits. Again, this is what we had in the last slide. It's just explaining it one more time, just to be clear. So the next concern is how to institute an incentive system that induces the divisional managers to maximize their overall firm profits. So how do we get the managers to get on top of the optimal transfer pricing? Suppose that higher authorities within the firm determine that the level of final output that maximizes the overall firm profits is equal to Q star. They set transfer price, the internal price of the input, the car engine being sold from the upstream division to the downstream division, to be PT. Again, that's equal to the upstream division's marginal cost of producing the amount of input required by the downstream division to produce Q star units of output. So they set the upstream division's price equal to the marginal cost of producing the engine so that the upstream manager does not marginalize, does not price above their marginal cost. So according to this internal pricing scheme, the downstream manager can now purchase as many units of the input as it desires from the upstream division at a fixed price of PT per unit, essentially making the upstream division sell as though it were in a perfectly competitive market. The upstream and downstream managers are instructed to maximize divisional profits, taking as given the transfer price set by the higher authorities within the firm. Since the upstream division must sell the input internally at a fixed price of PT, the transfer price, it behaves like a perfectly competitive firm and maximizes profits by producing where price equals marginal cost. So PT, the transfer price, equals the marginal cost of the upstream division of producing that additional input. Since one unit of the input is required for each unit of output, the downstream division's marginal cost of producing final output is now MC, which is the overall marginal cost of the firm of producing a car, which equals the marginal cost of putting the car together plus the price of the input from the upstream division to the downstream division, which is the transfer price. Since the transfer price, again, is set equal to the upstream division's marginal cost, and setting the overall marginal cost equal to the downstream division's marginal revenue, and we know that marginal cost is equal to the downstream division's marginal cost, the cost of putting the car together, plus the cost of the engine. Setting that equal to the downstream division's marginal revenue, then and knowing that the transfer price is equal to the upstream division's marginal cost, then we have the upstream division's marginal cost equals the downstream division's marginal revenue minus marginal cost, which equals net marginal revenue, which is the condition that we established earlier to be the one that will maximize the overall firm profits. It's just another way of getting to the same result. I'm basically saying the same thing over and over again to try to clarify it, because it can be complicated if you're not kind of following it. All right, let's do an example to kind of see how it works. So suppose that the inverse demand for Aviation General's single engine plane is given by P equals 1500 minus Q. Its upstream division produces engines at a cost of 2.5 Q squared 2E. So this is the cost function for the upstream division to produce the airplane engine. And the downstream division's cost of assembling the planes is equal to CD of Q. So again, the downstream division has a cost of putting the plane together. The downstream marginal revenue is, of course, so again, we are assuming that the firm has market power. So they, again, this is the inverse demand function, so marginal revenue. The downstream marginal revenue is going to equal 1500 minus 2Q, just doubling the slope on that. The downstream marginal cost is equal to, again, the derivative of the downstream division's cost of producing. So the derivative of this with respect to quantity, which is 1,000. Upstream marginal cost is equal to the derivative of the upstream's cost function with respect to quantity of producing airplane engines. So that's going to equal 5 QE. Since it takes one engine to produce one plane, equating the net marginal revenue and for the downstream division and the marginal cost of the upstream division implies, so we've got the net marginal revenue from the downstream division, which equals, in this case, 15,000 minus 2 QE minus 1,000. So you've got so let me see where I get that. So the minus 2 QE. Trying to remember where I go. Oh, I remember now. Okay, so net marginal revenue equals, for the downstream division, equals the marginal revenue from the downstream division, which we get from this, minus the marginal cost of the downstream division to put the car together. So you've got 15,000 minus 2 QE minus 1,000. And set that equal to the upstream division's marginal cost of producing an extra engine, which is equal to 5 QE. And so we can solve for the optimal amount of airplane engines to produce. So here we've got, combine these two terms, that's 14,000. Add this to both sides, so that's going to be 7Q on the right equals 14,000. Divide both sides by 7. So that means the amount of airplane engines that are going to be sold in order to maximize profits for this firm, overall profits, is equal to 2,000. The upstream division should produce 2,000 engines to maximize overall firm profits. Since QE equals Q, meaning that, again, the amount of engines produced implies the amount of airplanes that will be produced because it's one engine per airplane, the downstream division should produce 2,000 planes to maximize overall firm profits. The optimal transfer price is the upstream division's marginal cost evaluated at 2,000. So again, to figure out the optimal transfer price, the price that the input should be sold from the upstream division to the downstream division, we need to assume that that price is set at the competitive level for the upstream division, which means they set price equal to their own marginal cost. So we set the price equal to the marginal cost of the upstream division, which is equal to 5 QE. We know QE is equal to 2,000, and therefore the optimal transfer price for the upstream division is $10,000. So that's the price, the division that creates the airplane engines, that's the price they should charge the downstream division in order to maximize the overall profits of the firm. So the firm maximizes its overall profits when its accountants set the internal transfer price of engines at $10,000 per unit, and divisional managers are provided an incentive to maximize divisional profits given this price, versus, again, letting them do whatever they want, and the upstream division will not set their price equal to their marginal cost. They will set their price equal to their marginal revenue, which, again, will be a double marginalization, which will wind up setting the airplane prices too high in markets, and therefore they will eat into the firm's profits. I mentioned it was a little bit more complicated, and it is. Make sure you review that a couple times. All right, so pricing strategies in markets with intense price competition. So this is the last section. So again, we've talked about how in some of the oligopoly settings, the firms will be stuck in a prisoner's dilemma, essentially, and they'll wind up undercutting each other to the point where they charge their marginal cost and aren't able to earn extra profits because of price competition. So the final pricing strategies we'll examine: price matching, inducing brand loyalty, and randomized pricing are valuable for firms competing in Bertrand oligopoly. Recall that firms in Bertrand oligopoly compete in price and sell similar products. In these instances, price wars will likely result, leading to prices that are close to marginal cost and profits that are near zero. While the pricing strategies discussed in this section can be used in situations other than Bertrand oligopoly, they are particularly useful for mitigating, making better, the price wars that frequently occur in such a market. All right, the first one is price matching. So in chapters 9 and 10, we show that when two or more firms compete in homogeneous product Bertrand oligopoly, the Nash equilibrium is for each firm to charge marginal cost and earn zero economic profits. In chapter 10, we showed that if the game is infinitely repeated and firms can maintain collusive outcomes by adopting trigger strategies which punish rivals that deviate from the high price, that they're able to essentially get out of that dilemma and charge a higher price than marginal cost. Recall that this strategy can only work, though, if the interest rate is low and firms can effectively monitor the behavior of other firms in the market. In cases where trigger strategies do not work, there's another way that firms can attain higher profits, and that's by advertising price matching strategies. So a firm that uses a price matching strategy advertises a price and promises to match any lower price offered by a competitor. Suppose the firms in a market play a one-shot Bertrand pricing game. So that's, again, one situation in which the firms are meeting one time in the market. They're setting prices on their own without knowing what the other rival is going to set, and they only have one chance to do it. But let's assume that the firms advertise a commitment to match any lower price found in the market. If all firms in the market announce such a policy, they can set the price, P, to the high monopoly price and earn large profits. Since all firms are charging the same high price, consumers can't find a better price in the market. The result is that firms share the market, charge the monopoly price, and earn higher profits. No firm has an incentive to charge a lower price in an attempt to steal customers from rivals. Because if they lower their price, a firm can effectively trigger a price war which results in no greater share of the market and lower profits. They'll have to match the lower prices, everybody will wind up charging a lower price, and everybody will wind up making lower profits. So if all firms adopt a price matching strategy, the result is that each firm charges the monopoly price and shares the market to earn high profits. An important aspect of price matching policies is that the firms need not monitor the prices charged by rivals. So they don't have to keep an eye on the other firms because, again, all they need is for customers to come to them and tell them what their rivals are charging, and they will have to match those prices. If some other firm happened to charge a low price, a firm using a price matching strategy would get to price discriminate. Before choosing to adopt a price matching strategy, there's two things to consider. First, you have to devise a mechanism that precludes customers from claiming to have found a lower price that where in fact they have not, so they have to prove it. Second, you can get into trouble with a price matching strategy if a competitor has lower costs than your firm. So remember, the monopoly price is set by setting marginal revenue equal to marginal cost. If marginal cost is higher for a firm, then that is going to lead to a higher price, which means that the price matching strategy will not work precisely because one firm will have a different cost than the other. So if your competitor's marginal cost, let's say, is $300 for a television set and yours is $400, the profit maximizing monopoly price set by your firm is going to be higher than that set by your rival. All right. The second of the three price strategies, again by firms that are engaged in price competition, is inducing brand loyalty. So another strategy a firm can use to reduce the tension of Bertrand competition is to adopt strategies that induce brand loyalty. Brand loyal customers will continue to buy a firm's product even if another firm offers a slightly better price. Firms can use several methods to induce brand loyalty. Advertising, but that will not work if consumers believe the products to be the same. Some gasoline stations now have frequent filler programs modeled after the frequent flyer program initiated by the airline, so differentiate by special services or programs. Frequent filler programs provide consumers with a cash rebate after a specified number of fill-ups. All right, and the third strategy that firms can use is called randomized pricing. The final strategy firms can use to enhance profits in markets with intense price competition is to engage in randomized pricing. With randomized price strategy, a firm varies its price from hour to hour or day to day. Such a strategy can benefit a firm for two reasons. Consumers cannot learn from experience which firms charge the lowest price in the market, and that increases the uncertainty about where the best deal exists. So firms reduce consumers' incentive to shop for price information. The second advantage of randomized prices is that they reduce the ability of rival firms to undercut a firm's price. Randomized pricing precludes rivals from knowing precisely what price to charge to undercut a given firm's price. So you'll see those kind of strategies during Christmas, especially like on Amazon. Like they tend to like just have all sorts of different prices, and they vary throughout the day, they vary throughout the week, and it's a way for them again to not have to engage in price wars with their competitors and wind up losing. Anyway, we're done with the chapter, folks. We're done with the lecture. That's why I wanted to get started early, because we get to finish early. All right, so I hope everybody has a good night.